So this morning, we have a guest speaker with us. Come on up here, Greg. Some of you will recognize Pastor Greg Hochhalter from several months ago when he came and spoke back in November. I believe it was, beginning of November, something like that. I was supposed to be here that morning with you guys, and I got sick that morning just as he was pulling up, and I looked at him, and I had a mask on, and I said, "I'm so sorry. Here's the mic. I got to go. Good luck." So we were very thankful, though, and I believe that I remember many of you speaking in the days and weeks afterwards just how much that message spoke to you in where you were at, and Greg speaking on forgiveness. And we're happy to have you back here. Greg's the lead pastor at Sherwood Park Alliance Church, and yeah, thank you, Greg, so much for coming out here again. So.
Thank you, Jonathan. I have that effect on a lot of people when I meet them. They instantly get sick, kind of thing. Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning, everyone. It is real. Thank you for that. That's nice. Grateful to be back with you. Yeah, it was back in November. I recall driving out last time. It's about a 30-minute drive from my place in Sherwood Park. And the last time I drove out here was the first significant kind of snow where it was like, oh, I should get my winter tires on kind of snow. And so I kind of drove through a very poor visibility and kind of snow. And then it's fun to come back this time and be in the spring. So we've been through it. We made it. We made it another lap through the calendar, and grateful to be with you in the spring when it's looking hopeful and optimistic. And thank you again just for the warm welcome and the energy in this space. I love seeing the kids running around and just your enthusiasm. It's encouraging to be here. And I like being able to go into places where you feel a sense of family rather quickly. And I've always felt that every time I've been into this place that, I'm with friends, I'm with brothers and sisters in Christ. So grateful for the chance to share a little bit with you this morning. When Jonathan and I were talking a few weeks ago and we were kind of putting this morning together, he told me a little bit about the message series that he and your team here and your leaders were planning, this Rekindle and fanning into flames our faith. He said, we're kind of doing something on faith, which is a big, broad subject. But then when he explained a little bit more, it came to me very quickly what topic or text that I wished to speak about, because when it comes to faith, there are a number of different characters in the scriptures that inspire me and are kind of seminal for me. And there's one that I go back to often, and that's the one I'd like to speak on this morning. Now, her name is Debra, and her story is found in the book of Judges. But before we get to the text, I want to give you something of a trigger warning, if I could. I'm about to teach from a story that's got a lot of violence in it. It's one of those kind of bloody, gruesome texts. And some people find these particular texts to be off-putting. Maybe that's even some of you. I know it's texts like these that have actually caused some people to walk away from faith because they think, if that's what God is about, I don't want to have anything to do with a God who's into that kind of violence. Sometimes people are turned off just by the way these stories are taught. Maybe it's not even the content of the scriptures, but it's the flippant manner of and the way sometimes we refer to the violence that we see in the Old Testament. Sometimes we'll joke. Pastors like me will joke about brutal deaths that we read about in the scripture. And we see stuff like the taking of land and enslaving foes and just general bragging about whose God is the best God. All of that stuff is rather horrific and kind of hard to examine sometimes. It leads to even sometimes some callous comments about historical and contextual violence. We kind of sometimes don't really care for the muscular, violent way Christianity is described. Some of this stuff has done some damage, and that's true throughout history. It's even true a little bit today. So with all of that, I just want to give you a little perspective that might be helpful. This is sort of a bonus for you about how to process. I'm an American originally. I just revealed that, didn't I? This is some ways to process some of the Bible's more gruesome narratives. And this perspective is not original with me. It's from a Hebrew professor from Westminster Seminary. His name is Al Groves. And I was reading something a few years ago that he wrote about these particular texts and these particular theological difficulties. And one of the things that Grove said in this little article was, God lets his children tell the story. God lets his children tell the story. The Bible that we have, the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament specifically, is what we get when God allows his children to contribute to telling the story, which means the biblical writers tell the story from their point of view, within their own human limitations and their historical context. When God lets his children tell the story, they do it heavily influenced by the rules of the schoolyard, which governed the culture of the day. Ancient tribal societies were known for warring and killing and vanquishing in the name of their gods and their kings. And this is how some people think the rule of the schoolyard and why it's sort of all over the Old Testament in particular. It's a way to help us understand why the Bible behaves the way it does. But if we extend this idea to the New Testament, one of the perspectives that might help you is to think of the teachings of Jesus as a more mature way of telling God's story. Jesus reveals the nature and the character of the Father in a different way, in a way more in line with the God that we believe he is. Jesus would say all the time, you've heard it said, but I tell you. You've heard this, but I tell you. So Jesus kind of offers us this new perspective on these ancient scriptures. So that's why as God's story evolves, a lot of the land acquisition and the killing and the enslaving of enemies becomes more absent from the narrative. It's present in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, that's where we get to the love of enemies and the turning the other cheek and the crossing of racial and culture and gender divides. And so as I teach this story with a lot of crazy violence, don't receive it as God's ideal, as God's ultimate way. Much of it is not the way of Jesus, but there's still some good lessons in the story. And it's fascinating literature. This really is fascinating. Now, real quick, if you've got younger ones in the room, I will be sensitive in some of my descriptions, but if you have any concerns about what your child might be exposed to in the next few moments, you have a couple of options. One is to deploy countermeasures. You know what those are? Like something to distract. Here, do this, whatever. Or you could check out the kids ministry that looked really great when I was walking by it a few minutes ago. So there's your disclaimer. I will try to be sensitive to this. So, let me set the context of the book of Judges, because we're going to jump into a story that's part of a pattern. There's a pattern in the book of Judges, and it's a repetitive pattern. And here's how the pattern kind of goes. Things start out peaceful. There's harmony between God and his people. There's oneness. There's togetherness. Most of the story of the Old Testament is the story of the nation of Israel. So if you're looking at this chronologically, as the book of Joshua ends and Judges begins, things are more or less up and to the right. Israel has become a nation. God's covenant promise to Abraham back in Genesis seems to be going well. The people have gone through this long period of wandering, and now they're sort of in their place. They're in Canaan. They're in the promised land. There's lots of goodness, and there's peace, and there's harmony. Things are, again, up and to the right. But here's the pattern. Peace always leads to complacency, and complacency leads to sin. Usually the sin is idolatry, and that results in oppression or pain. By the way, pain always follows sin. It's just kind of how it works. And so you get this repetitive pattern, and it's this pattern of Israel sinning, and God removes his hand of blessing and protection when they sin, when they fall into this pattern. And that's when the warring nations, the neighboring nations, kind of come in and start kicking them around. But when the pain gets bad enough, Israel cries out to God for help, for a deliverer to throw off their oppressors. Again, that's part of the pattern too. Things get bad. Oh God, we need help. And so God provides a deliverer. In the book of Judges, there's a series of judges. That's where we get the term. And so after the oppressors are defeated, there's peace again until complacency returns and the pattern repeats itself. You tracking with me? So, complacency, sin, pain, deliverer, oppressors are thrown off. Okay, it's good again, and then the pattern repeats. This happens 12 times in the book of Judges. The people make the same foolish choices over and over and over again. Okay, so that's kind of the book of Judges in a nutshell. So all of that now is background. That's all set up to the actual story that we're about to unpack. So here we go. This is Judges chapter 4, starting in verse 1. Again, there's the pattern. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord now that Ehud was dead. And so the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. So God allows another foreign king to put a beat down on them because of their sin. Sisera, the commander of his army, was based in Harosheth Hagoyim because he had 900 chariots fitted with iron. Got to just say something about that for a second. This is part of the beginning of the Iron Age. Historians consider chariots as something like the first weapons of mass destruction. Like they were a very powerful tool. And now Israel is facing chariots fortified with iron. So this is very formative. This is WMDs on steroids. So Jabin's army cruelly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years. And here they go. They cried to the Lord for help. When things get bad enough, Israel always cries out to God for help. And it's bad. It's bad this time. And we're going to get some detail here on how bad. Everybody in the community is hiding. They're off the main roads. They're sort of sneaking around hidden paths. My son, when COVID was at its worst, he and his wife were living in Montreal. And Montreal really got shut down. Like, you couldn't be on the streets until after 8 p.m. $1,500 fine for being on the streets. Our son was working, running a restaurant, and he would kind of sneak to the restaurant sometimes when he would run out of coffee. But literally, to go to 4 or 5 blocks, he would dress in all black and take alleys and sneak around to just try to avoid being seen on the streets of Montreal after dark. That's kind of what's going on in this culture. Everybody's kind of sneaking around. Village life in Israel has ceased. Everybody's afraid to go outside. And that's a problem. If you're afraid to go outside in the historical setting here, that's a problem because you got to go outside to get food. It's an agrarian economy. Everybody grows their own food. How do you grow your food? How do you raise the grain? How do you harvest what you need to feed your family if you don't go outside? It's very difficult. And when they do go out, Sisera's army just assaults them. They rob them. Sometimes these other foreign soldiers, they just kill for spite. And so Israel cries out, and then God chooses a very unique person to be the deliverer. This is verse 4. Now Debra, a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel. She held court under the palm of Debra between Ramah and Bethel and a hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided. Now, this is pretty fascinating here because Debra is unique among all the other judges for several reasons, but the first and most obvious is that she's a woman. Now, this is not a message or a statement about gender roles, but it's fascinating that all the way back here in the Old Testament, a woman is large and in charge in Israel, and she's an extraordinary leader. Most of the judges are military leaders. Deborah's distinct in that she's a spiritual leader first. She's a prophet. She's anointed for deep community with God. She's considered to be the one through whom God speaks. And not only is she a respected woman of God and a prophet, but she's also a civic leader as well. She spends her time settling disputes among the Israelites. So pretty extraordinary character here. So now we're ready to meet one of the other main characters. If Debra is the spiritual and civic leader in Israel, there is a military leader around, and his name is Barak or Barak. I'm not really sure which one. I'll probably use both, Barak or Barak. And as the chapter unfolds, God speaks to Debra and tells her what to do about King Jabin's soldiers. She sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kedesh in Naphtali, and said to him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, Go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, those are two of the tribes of Israel, and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River and give him into your hands. Now, here's where I want to pause for a minute to wrap your minds around what Debra is saying here. In order for this to have full impact, you got to feel this a little bit. Any leader with any kind of military sophistication would recognize immediately that Debra is suggesting something that sounds like a suicide mission. This sounds crazy. Debra says to Barak, listen, here's the plan. This is God's plan. He wants you to go pick a fight with the most powerful and terrifying fighting force the world has ever seen. Don't worry about the fact that Sisera has 40,000 troops and hundreds of chariots. You guys just go call them out. Take them on, kind of charge right on toward them. Now, Barak was born at night, but not last night. So he's like, okay, hey, wait a second. His response is kind of calculated. I think it's even clever. Here's what he says. Barak says to her, if you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go. Barak says, I'll go if you go with me. But if you don't go, I'm not going. But if you go to the battle with us, all right, I'm in. Well, certainly I will go with you, said Debra. But because of the course you're taking, the whole I'm not going to go unless you go with me, because of what you're doing here, the honor will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. Now again, some crazy background here. Customarily, the general who wins the battle makes the final decision about what happens to the losing general. The honor, if you can call it that, of killing an opposing general goes to the victorious general. So if the leader on the other side is near the battlefield, sometimes the opposing soldiers will be kind of careful not to kill them so the honor can fall to their leader. Following me? So Debra says, well, okay, this is a prophecy. Because you're doing it this way, the honor of killing Sisera is going to go to a woman, and she's not talking about herself. She's not talking about herself. Now, this is a critical part of the story. I have heard Barak's actions being described as not very noble. Sometimes he gets picked on. He's described with not flattering terms, like he's kind of scared and he's kind of wimpy. Please don't go there. I don't think that's the picture we ought to have here. I don't think he's soft. I think Barak is wise. I think Barak understands the odds. The odds are overwhelmingly against them, which means, if God doesn't show up, they're going to get crushed. God doesn't show up, they're going to get crushed. This is what he knows. Because what they're considering is crazy. From a military perspective, the plan is absolutely flawed. The other army has 40,000 chariots and 40,000 soldiers and 900 chariots. Debra tells Barak to take his men, remember what it said, up to Mount Tabor, which is more like a big bump than, don't think Rocky Mountains, think like foothills. Like it's a big bump. And Debra says that God will help her lure Sisera and his men to the banks of the Kishon River, and that's where the battle will happen. And the Kishon River runs, and this, you can go and you can actually look this up in an atlas. The Kishon River runs down the middle of a valley between Mount Tabor and several other hills. In other words, the battle's going to take place on the valley floor, in the very bottom, right where chariots would be most effective, like right there on the flats. In the hills, the chariots might be slowed, but in the plains, they're lethal. So in your minds, try to picture a valley, like one of those real distinct valleys. There's a valley that always comes to my mind whenever I'm thinking about this text, and some of you have probably driven through there. If you're headed for like Sandpoint or Cranbrook or Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and you drive to southern Alberta and you go down through the Crow's Nest Pass and you go down into BC and you go to Cranbrook and then you head south to Sandpoint, soon as you cross the border into the States there, into northern Idaho, there's this spectacular valley that you come across. And some of you, you've been there, you've seen it, just majestic side walls and then this completely flat valley floor with a river running through it. That's a perfect sort of picture to have in your mind. Where would you rather fight Sisera? Again, remember, the count is 900 chariots to 0. If you would like to increase your chances against those chariots, you'd say, let's lure them up the hills a little bit. But the word from God through Debra is, leave the hill, go down to the valley floor and attack. They've got 40,000 experienced, trained, equipped soldiers. Israel's got like 10,000, and they're not well equipped. They're not well trained. They're mostly a bunch of farmers. That's kind of what they are. Barak's recruited an army from a couple of tribes. He's basically gone door to door saying, hey, everybody, grab a rock, grab a hoe, grab a stick, whatever you got, bring it down, because we're going to go pick a fight with Sisera. And so this is why I think he says to Debra, I'll do this, but you got to go. Like, we need you. Because he knows the only way they're going to be successful in this battle is if God shows up. And the best way to ensure the presence of God is to bring along the prophet of God. Now we're ready to meet another character. In verse 10, we meet a guy named Heber. Heber is an Israelite, but he's a traitor. And he's got connections in Sisera's army. And when he hears that Debra and Barak are planning to, orchestrate this attack, he leaks the plan to Sisera. The Bible's insane. It's like a great story here. So he leaks the plan to Sisera, which lures his army into the river valley, not because they're scared though, but because they're pumped. They think it's going to be a slaughter. I just described verses 11 to 15. Okay, so here's the stage. It's all set. On one side of the valley, up on the hill just a little bit, are 10,000 farmers with rocks and sticks. They're ready to charge down the hill toward 40,000 professionally trained, armored, and weaponized troops in battle formation who know the attack is coming. They're ready for them. So not surprisingly, Barak's faith starts to wobble a little bit. Imagine, if I was to, here it comes. I'm not sure he can see what his faith starts to wobble just a little bit. And so he looks for some encouragement from Debra, and Debra is willing to provide it. Then Debra said to Barak, go for it. This is the day the Lord hath given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you? Barak looks down the valley floor and says, oh man, I don't know. And Debra looks down and says, we got them right where we want them. Okay, they're all sitting there waiting for us. She's looking through the lens of tremendous faith. Even though the odds look completely stacked against them. She doesn't say, go, this is the day the Lord might deliver Sisera into your hands. She says, no, this is the day God has done it. He has given Sisera into your hands. It's as if it's already happened. It's done. God has decreed it. If they do what God asks of them, it's as good as done. If they do their part, God will do his. So Barak takes all of this in, and he takes it all by faith, and he goes. So Barak went down Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. Barak's advance, the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and army by the sword, and Sisera got down from his chariot and fled on foot. He runs. Now, the Bible doesn't give us a lot of detail about what happens on the valley floor that day. The Hebrew word translated here, routed, according to the language scholars, carries with it the idea of panic. So that's a little bit of a clue in the text. For whatever reason, the soldiers of Sisera, they panic at the sight of 10,000 crazy Jewish farmers charging at them with sticks. And they just kind of lose it. You know, they see these guys coming throwing matzo balls at them. And instead of fighting, they just turn and freak out and they're just completely overrun. The next chapter, that's all from Judges chapter 4. In the next chapter, Judges 5, there's a song. Much of the chapter is a song that Debra writes after the battle's over. And there's some lines in the song about the chariots getting stuck in the mud, which maybe gives us a little bit of an indication of how it all goes down. But usually when, an army like this with chariots, fights, and they just kind of mow the opposition down, and then the foot soldiers will come in behind and mop things up. But apparently in this case, the chariots get stuck. Jabin's army kind of freaks out, and they just get slaughtered. And verse 16 says, this is, again, pretty harsh. We shouldn't just sort of not feel this. Not a man is left. Like, it's a wipeout. Except for one guy. The main guy. When it's clear the rout is on, Sisera does not wait around to get slaughtered there. He runs. He pieces out. He runs for his life. Now, let's bring this all together. Remember that prophecy about the honor of killing the opposing general not going to be given to the military leader. It's going to go to a woman. Well, here's how that part happens. So you need to meet one more character. There's another woman in Judges chapter 4 named Jael. Sisera, the guy who's running, the scared guy, he's looking for a place to hide because 10,000 farmers are chasing him. So where's he going to go? Where's he going to hide? Among all the Israelites, he's got one friend, a traitor, the double agent Heber. Remember Heber? Heber's the guy that leaked the news that the attack is coming. So he heads to Heber's house, hoping to find refuge. But when he gets to Heber's house, Heber's not there, but his wife is home. Jael is Heber's wife. Jael sees him kind of sneaking around in the yard, up behind the house, whatever, the tent. And so she goes out and she says, come here. Come in here and I'll protect you. You can hide inside the tent. So Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, come, my lord, come right in, don't be afraid. So he entered her tent and she covered him with a blanket. Now, she covers him, to hide him. Yeah, for sure. In his exhaustion, it looks like he just passes out. He falls asleep, like he's spent, he's been running. But before he does that, he says, I'm thirsty. Please give me some water. She opened him a skin of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him up. Stand in the doorway of the tent, he told her, and if someone comes by and asks you, is anyone in there? Just tell them no. Keep moving. But Jael, Heber's wife, picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he lay fast asleep, exhausted. She drove the peg through his temple into the ground, and he died. I'm not sure we needed those last three words. It's pretty obvious, right? Just then Barak came by in pursuit of Sisera, and Jael went out to meet him. Come, she said, I will show you the man you're looking for. And so he went in with her, and there lay Sisera with the tent peg through his temple, dead. So on that day, God subdued Jabin, the king of Canaan, before the Israelites. And scene. Any drama people in the room? That's the end of the story. Sisera's gone. Hammered. It's over. And because King Jabin doesn't have his army anymore, the oppression stops and Israel is once again at peace. And if you keep reading in Judges, it's an incredible piece of scripture. If you keep reading in Judges, the pattern repeats itself over again and over again and over again. After a time of peace, complacency leads to sin and dysfunction until God raises up another deliverer, which, by the way, is a nod to the ultimate deliverer who will come much later. This is where you want to sort of keep your eyes peeled for Jesus when you're reading through these scriptures as well, because this is foreshadowing an ultimate deliverer who will come much later on in the scriptures. But back to chapter 5, again, we have this victory song there. Debra and Barak sing a song of praise to God for delivering them out of the hands of their oppressors. It's a worship song. It's a duet, an unabashed story of songs of praise of God to the God of Israel. And so that's how Judges 4 and 5 ends. So, what do we do in 2023 with a story like this? Again, sometimes as pastors, we'll do biographical messages. It's a real temptation for pastors, right, Jonathan? Like, we'll do a biographical message, and the sort of easy or unsophisticated way of applying a text like this is to say to people, hey, go be more like so-and-so. Just be more like this person. Look at this person. Look at this great person here. Be like them. That's not the most nuanced application sometimes. In the case of this story, I think there's actually a few points of application here, but I think there's one biggie. And this is why I thought this would fit well into your study that you're doing these few weeks here. This is a story ultimately about faith, about audacious faith, really. It's about bold faith. It's about big faith. This is a story about two people with incredible faith in their God. Two people willing to take a courageous faith step when God senses, or when they sense that this is what God is asking them to do. This is a very compelling story about great faith, bold faith. Another way of looking at the story is, with something like this, we get a little reminder that it doesn't take very much for God to change a community. In the case of this story, it doesn't really even take a lot of people. God alters the course of history for a whole bunch of people through the actions of just two. A couple of courageous leaders can have powerful impact on a lot of other people, maybe even on a whole nation. Most of you probably have stories about people that you admire. They were maybe sometimes lone voices describing possibility even in the face of opposition. And maybe they stepped out, or they led their families or faith communities or charities or churches out, and great kingdom accomplishments followed because of the faith of those leaders. There's probably some faithful leaders in the story of Sturgeon Alliance and this community of Gibbons that, were those prophetic voices of possibility and faith. And you're here today maybe because of the actions of some of these folks. Well, might you be that person for future generations? Just a way to look at this. But here's how I'd like to wind this down and maybe help you personalize this a little bit. Consider this summary a description of how you might use a text like this to rekindle your faith when it starts to falter a little bit. And this is not original with me. This is something I adapted from a pastor named Jeff Jones. He says, and I agree with him, people who display big, audacious faith, they tend to do four things. First, they pray big. People with this kind of faith, they pray big. Listen, God is sovereign. He can and will move as he pleases and wishes and wants. But over and over again in the pages of his word, God says, bring your prayers and petitions to God. Sometimes he says, you have not because you ask not. So my challenge to you would be to answer this question, and this might be something you want to process on your own with somebody you love, your small group, your significant other. Might do this on your own. Talk about this on the way home. Maybe think about it right in this moment. But what would you pray about if I challenged you to pray an audacious prayer this morning? Like, what would you pray into if I said, what's a bold prayer you've been contemplating, but maybe you've not, given voice to? Would you pray for somebody in your family? Would you pray about something in your personal life? Would you pray about a ministry thing, something related to your church or to this community? Would you pray for something or someone that maybe you've given up on and stopped praying for? Maybe just because your doubt is too powerful right now. People who display big, audacious faith, they tend to pray big. They also tend to dream big. Brock and Debra didn't talk themselves out of going up against Ezra. They could have. They very easily could have. But somehow they saw past the obstacles and they saw opportunity. It's so much easier to focus on obstacles than opportunities. There's a human tendency to focus more on what we can't do than on what we can. And we've all seen lots of that in the last 3 years. We just, I can't do this and I'm mad. But there's always things we can do. So here's a fascinating question that you might want to think about and try to answer for yourself. Is there a need in your sphere of influence, your community, your family, your institution, your place of work or business, that something that you can be part of solving? You know, maybe the calling to you, the challenge to you is to dream again, and maybe even to dream big. That's what people with bold faith do. They dream big. They pray big. They dream big. People with audacious faith, big faith, also act big. Faith generally requires some kind of action. I'm taking you back to the part of the story that, Brock kind of looks down the valley at what looks like insurmountable odds. But then it says he went down Mount Tabor. He moved. He took that leap of faith. Audacious faith usually requires doing something. It might be saying something or standing for something or giving something or giving away something. It might be going somewhere. But God may be calling you right now to take some action. Is there an action step that you sense he's asking you to take? And finally, people with this kind of infectious, audacious faith, they praise big. They pray, they think, they go, they have actions, but they also praise big. People with big, bold faith tend to talk about what God is doing, and they're not shy about it sometimes. You know people like this. God is always up to something. And when you see God being up to something, my encouragement to you is talk about it. That's what Judges chapter 5 is all about. Debra writes this song of deliverance for the people. They want to be able to remember this moment. That's what this song does. And so my encouragement to you, again, if nothing else, figure out a way to apply this by thinking about what you can be grateful for, what you can praise God for. Maybe it's building a little monument, like some of the rocks in the spring to pile up a little. This is to remember the provision of God throughout the last year or 3 years or whatever. It's good to give praise and thanksgiving for how God has provided, how he's guided, and for what he's done. That's another thing you can certainly do. Despite whatever you're going through, or what you've been through, or what you're facing, people with great faith pray, dream, and act and praise big. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, it is a gift to be together in this way, and your scriptures are a gift to us. Thank you for these powerful texts that on one hand can be confusing and frustrating and a little bit unsettling, yet at the same time they become these great inspirational moments for us to really take action steps and to connect with you and to align with you and to respond to you. So God, I pray for my friends, my brothers and sisters in Christ here at Sturgeon Alliance, that you would find them faithful to responding to the promptings of your Spirit and to moving out in great faith when they're called upon. Pray blessing on these homes and these families and on this community as they anticipate the next steps in leadership. God, I pray that you would continue to make this particular faith community a shining light in this city, in this community, for your kingdom good. In your name we pray these things. Amen.
When I feel fear coming